During a lavish dinner to celebrate their relationship, powerful construction tycoon, Vincent Callahan had prepared every detail for a perfect evening. When the woman beside him stepped into the restroom, a homeless little girl suddenly rushed over and trembled as she warned him, "Sir, she put something in your cake." His survival instincts took over instantly. Without letting anyone notice, Vincent quietly switched the two dessert plates. When she returned to the table, everyone was left frozen in shock by what happened next. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a 40-year-old life. The Chicago skyline glittered like scattered diamonds against the ink-black night as Vincent Callahan adjusted the cuffs of his tailored charcoal suit. From the sweeping terrace of offshore rooftop at Navy Pier, the view stretched endlessly, the shimmering lights of downtown, the dark ribbon of the Chicago River, and the distant glow of Lake Michigan. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls framed the scene like a living painting, while soft jazz mingled with the low hum of exclusive conversation. At 45 years old, Vincent embodied controlled power. His construction empire rose across the Midwest skyscrapers, bearing the Callahan name, union deals sealed with iron handshakes and legitimate wealth that masked deeper currents of influence. Yet tonight, none of that weight felt like victory. He had reserved the entire private section of the rooftop for this dinner. White tablecloths caught the flicker of candlelight. Crystal glasses reflected the city's glow. A single red rose stood in a slender vase at the center of the table. Everything arranged with precision. Everything meant to project strength and success. But inside Vincent's chest, something gnawed relentlessly, a quiet, consuming remorse that no amount of power could silence. Years of street-level survival had forged him into this man. Fair-skinned, broad-shouldered, with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. He had clawed his way from nothing, burying guilt over choices that once kept food on the table but cost pieces of his soul. The violent loss of his younger brother still haunted quiet moments. Every deal, every confrontation with rival factions left deeper scars. He told himself the empire protected those who remained loyal, yet lately the loneliness pressed heavier. Power isolated as much as it shielded. Sophia Lang entered the private area with practiced elegance. Her emerald dress hugged her figure, auburn hair falling in soft waves. At 34, she carried the polished confidence of someone accustomed to fine rooms and finer company. They had been together nearly 2 years. She, the poised companion who understood his world without asking too many questions. Or so Vincent had believed. "You have outdone yourself again," she said, her voice smooth as she took in the candlelit table, the panoramic view, and the chilled bottle of premium champagne. "This is magnificent. Only the best." Vincent replied, the corner of his mouth lifting in a half-smile that did not quite reach his eyes. He poured the champagne, the golden liquid catching the light. Their glasses clinked with a clear, resonant sound that lingered in the cool night air. The meal unfolded in courses of refined American cuisine, seared scallops with truffle essence, perfectly grilled steak with red wine reduction, crisp salads, and palate-cleansing sorbet. Throughout, Vincent studied Sophia more closely than usual. A subtle tension tightened her shoulders. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her face when she thought he was not looking. The inner conflict he carried, daily guilt over past decisions, the weight of protecting an empire built on both legitimate sweat and darker dealings, made him hyper-aware of every small misalignment. "Is everything all right?" he asked between courses, his voice low and measured. "You seem distracted tonight." "Just overwhelmed by all this," Sophia replied, gesturing to the extravagant setting with a practiced smile, "and perhaps a little anxious about the surprise I have planned. It is not quite ready yet." Vincent nodded, though doubt crept like shadows at the edges of his thoughts. In 2 years he had learned to read people with the same instinct that kept him alive on Chicago's unforgiving streets. Her words said one thing, but her body language whispered another. The remorse that lived inside him stirred again, the gnawing sense that his life of calculated power had left little room for genuine trust. As the main plates were cleared, Sophia excused herself. "I need to freshen up before dessert," she said, brushing a light kiss against his cheek before disappearing toward the restrooms. Left alone, Vincent sipped his champagne and gazed out at the glittering city. His phone vibrated with messages from site managers and union contacts, but he ignored them. He had built his success by reading situations with uncanny accuracy. Right now, his instincts rang a low, persistent alarm he could not yet name. The guilt he carried over choices that once protected his family but cost him pieces of his humanity felt heavier tonight. The head chef appeared personally with 2 covered silver platters. "Mr. Callahan, our special dessert deep dish cannoli cake with gold leaf and fresh raspberry sauce. The lady mentioned it was one of your favorites." Vincent thanked him, noting the detail. He had never discussed dessert preferences with Sophia. A small thing, perhaps, but it registered in the growing list of quiet discrepancies. As the chef retreated, a sudden commotion near the entrance drew his attention. A small figure darted between the host and a security guard, weaving through tables with surprising agility. Within moments, a girl no older than 11 appeared at the edge of the private section, breathing hard. She wore a faded blue Cubs hoodie, several sizes too large threadbare jeans with holes at the knees, and sneakers so worn the original color had long faded. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, her blue eyes startlingly bright against a face marked by exhaustion, locked onto Vincent with desperate urgency. The child's appearance struck him like a physical blow. She was painfully thin cheeks, hollow from months, perhaps years of hunger. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from too many sleepless nights on cold streets or overcrowded shelter floors. Windburn chapped her skin. Her small hands trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of the table. This was poverty at its most extreme. A child who had endured freezing winter nights, huddled in doorways, scavenging scraps from dumpsters behind diners, dodging dangers no child should ever face. The stark contrast to the luxury surrounding them made Vincent's chest tighten with an unexpected surge of protective instinct. "Don't eat that cake," she whispered urgently, pointing to the covered platters. "She put something bad in yours. Switch the plates when she is not looking. Please." Vincent stared momentarily speechless. "Who are you? How did you—" Security moved in quickly. "I am sorry, Mr. Callahan. This street kid slipped in through the service entrance. We will remove her immediately." The girl pulled against the guard's grip, her voice trembling but determined. "Switch the plates. When she is not looking. I heard them talking. Something bad." Her eyes held no lie, only raw, fierce survival, and a moral clarity that cut through the night. Before Vincent could respond further, the guard escorted her away despite her struggles. He caught one last glance of her small frame disappearing toward the exit. The manager appeared apologizing profusely for the breach. Left alone with the covered desserts, Vincent faced an absurd dilemma. The rational part of his mind, the one that had negotiated million-dollar contracts and stared down rival crews, dismissed the warning as impossible. Yet the intuitive side that had saved him from countless betrayals could not ignore the girl's desperate intensity. Those blue eyes had carried the weight of too many unjust hardships. His inner turmoil deepened. Guilt over his own past, the violent choices, the abandoned responsibilities, the brother he could not save clashed violently with the sudden overwhelming surge of compassion. Why had a child living in absolute misery risked everything to warn a stranger? The question tore at him. He glanced toward the restrooms. Sophia was still absent. With a swift movement that surprised even himself, Vincent switched the positions of the platters. His heart pounded. The inner conflict raged. Part of him recoiled at the absurdity. Another part felt a fierce, protective fire ignite for the first time in years. He had just settled back when Sophia returned her makeup, refreshed her smile, dazzling. "Dessert has arrived," Vincent said casually, though his pulse raced. The chef called it deep dish cannoli cake. "Are they your favorite?" Sophia asked, taking her seat. "I made sure they prepared it specially." They lifted the covers simultaneously. Identical golden brown cannoli cakes sat before them, garnished with delicate gold leaf and swirls of raspberry sauce. It looked divine. Sophia picked up her spoon with practiced grace. "Shall we?" Vincent pretended to take a small bite, then set his spoon down to reach for his wine. "This pairing is excellent," he commented, watching carefully as Sophia took a generous portion. She savored it, murmuring approval. For the next 20 minutes, he maintained the charade, moving the dessert around his plate, while engaging in light conversation about upcoming charity events and weekend plans. All the while he watched her. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Then, as they finished their coffee, Sophia rubbed her temple. "Headache?" he asked, concern edging his voice. "Just a slight one," she replied, pressing harder. "Probably too much champagne." Minutes later, her hands began to tremble as she reached for her water. A thin sheen of perspiration appeared on her forehead despite the perfect temperature. Vincent's alarm grew, confirming the unthinkable. The girl's warning had been real. "Perhaps we should call it a night," he suggested. "You do not seem well." "No," Sophia insisted, her voice strained. "I am fine. Besides, I have a surprise for you. It should be arriving any minute." Her phone chimed. Vincent glimpsed the message as she checked it. Nothing yet. It should have worked by now. Her expression flickered with confusion, then concern. She slid the phone away too quickly. Everything inside Vincent shifted violently. The remorse he carried daily now collided with fierce protectiveness, not just for himself but for the small, malnourished girl who had risked arrest and worse to save a stranger. The inner turmoil tore at him. How many times had he failed to protect the innocent? How many unjust cruelties had he allowed in the name of survival? As Sophia's condition deteriorated, words slurring slightly, tremors worsening, Vincent signaled for the check while discreetly securing her phone. He called for medical help. The rooftop erupted into controlled chaos as paramedics arrived. In the ambulance sitting beside the semi-conscious woman, Vincent's thoughts returned again and again to the street girl. Her hollow cheeks, her trembling hands, the absolute poverty that had stripped her of every comfort a child deserved. The image burned into his mind, stirring something deep and paternal he had long buried. Later that night, after providing statements at the hospital and learning the toxin was real, Vincent could not rest. The gnawing guilt intensified. He had lived with power and wealth while children like her endured wind-filled nights, hunger that never eased, and humiliations that broke spirits daily. Unreasonable cruelties, shelters turning families away, cold streets offering no safety, a system that failed the most vulnerable played through his thoughts like a relentless film. He instructed his driver to head toward the south side shelters. The contrast hit harder with every block. Towering glass buildings gave way to worn neighborhoods where poverty pressed close. His penthouse in the Gold Coast waited with its soaring ceilings, private elevator, and panoramic views of the lake. Yet somewhere in the shadows, a thin, sleep-deprived girl with blue eyes had shown more courage than many men in his world. The search began in earnest. Vincent's team moved discreetly, avoiding drawing rival attention. Street confrontations loomed, tense exchanges with rival crew lookouts who sensed an intrusion into their territory. One confrontation near an underpass grew heated when a group blocked his path, demanding to know why a man like him was asking questions about a street kid. Vincent stood firm, voice low and commanding, diffusing the moment with calculated words and the quiet weight of his reputation. No fists flew, but the air crackled with threat. The encounter only deepened his resolve. He would not let another innocent slip through the cracks as he once had. Hours stretched. Exhaustion clouded his mind, yet the inner conflict burned brighter. Remorse over his past failures mixed with a sudden, overwhelming surge of love, not romantic, but fiercely protective and paternal. This child, whoever she was, had reached into his hollow empire and awakened something he thought long dead. He needed to find her. Not out of debt, but because the thought of her returning to those cold, humiliating streets tore at him violently. As dawn broke in, soft watercolor hues over Lake Michigan, Vincent's driver circled once more near a known shelter area. "Sir," the driver ventured, "perhaps we should rest and resume later." "One more pass," Vincent insisted, rubbing his eyes. The guilt and remorse churned inside him like a storm. Then he saw her, a small figure in the faded Cubs hoodie, sitting on a bench near the park edge, watching early morning joggers with weary eyes. "Stop here," he said quietly. He approached slowly, heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. The girl spotted him. For a moment she tensed, ready to run. Then something in his expression made her pause. "You switched the plates," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." Vincent sat at a respectful distance. "You saved my life. I need to understand how you knew." The child studied him with eyes far too old for her young face. She pulled her knees to her chest, a defensive posture born of too many betrayals. "I listen," she whispered. "People do not notice kids like me. We are invisible." "Not to me," Vincent replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Not anymore." Her name was Lily. She was 11, almost 12. Her mother, a kind, struggling single woman named Maria, had passed years earlier from illness, leaving Lily to survive on the streets and in temporary shelters. The poverty she described in soft, timid words was heartbreaking nights. So cold her thin frame shook uncontrollably. Days when the only food came from half-eaten sandwiches discarded behind diners. Constant fear of violence or authorities that might separate her further. Unjust situations piled one upon another, shelters full, landlords evicting without mercy, a system that offered little protection to a child with no one left. Vincent listened, the inner turmoil reaching a violent crescendo. Guilt over his own distant past clashed with fierce responsibility. He felt an overwhelming surge of paternal love from the very first moments, a deep protective compassion that demanded he shield this vulnerable girl from any more suffering. She was powerless, desperate, and utterly alone. He was wealthy beyond measure, powerful enough to change fates. The emotional conflict tore at him. Could a man with blood on his hands truly offer safety? Yet the answer came clear and fierce: he must try. "Lily," he said gently, "would you allow me to buy you breakfast? No strings attached, just food." Suspicion warred with hunger in her eyes. Hunger won. They sat in a worn booth at a simple South Side diner. Lily devoured pancakes and eggs with the intensity of someone who never knew when the next meal would come. Vincent sipped coffee, giving her space. His phone buzzed with urgent messages about rival tensions, but for the first time in years the Empire felt secondary. Later that morning, as they spoke quietly, Lily's soft, polite voice carried both fear and cautious curiosity. "Why are you being kind to me? You do not know me." "Because you were kind to me first." Vincent answered, his voice rough with emotion. Inside, the remorse and guilt battled against a growing determination. He would protect her. He would offer the stability she had never known. The fatherly bond ignited in that simple diner booth, quiet, condensed, yet profoundly moving. The inner worlds of both were already tearing and healing in equal measure. For Lily, sudden safety brought disorientation, numbness, and dizzying confusion alongside faint hope. For Vincent, the encounter stripped bare his emotional isolation, forcing him to confront the hollowness of power without purpose. The stark gap between his Gold Coast luxury and her street-level misery only intensified the conflict. As they left the diner, Vincent made a silent vow. Whatever rivals lurked, whatever guilt still gnawed, he would ensure this child never faced the world alone again. The Empire's celebration had ended. A far deeper journey, one of compassion, responsibility, and healing, had just begun. The Chicago skyline glittered like scattered diamonds against the ink-black night as Vincent Callahan adjusted the cuffs of his tailored charcoal suit. From the sweeping terrace of offshore rooftop at Navy Pier, the view stretched endlessly: the shimmering lights of downtown, the dark ribbon of the Chicago River, and the distant glow of Lake Michigan. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls framed the scene like a living painting, while soft jazz mingled with the low hum of exclusive conversation. At 45 years old, Vincent embodied controlled power. His construction empire rose across the Midwest. Skyscrapers bearing the Callahan name, union deals sealed with iron handshakes, and legitimate wealth that masked deeper currents of influence. Yet tonight, none of that weight felt like victory. He had reserved the entire private section of the rooftop for this dinner. White tablecloths caught the flicker of candlelight. Crystal glasses reflected the city's glow. A single red rose stood in a slender vase at the center of the table. Everything arranged with precision. Everything meant to project strength and success. But inside Vincent's chest, something gnawed relentlessly. A quiet, consuming remorse that no amount of power could silence. Years of street-level survival had forged him into this man, fair-skinned, broad-shouldered, with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. He had clawed his way from nothing, burying guilt over choices that once kept food on the table but cost pieces of his soul. The violent loss of his younger brother still haunted quiet moments. Every deal, every confrontation with rival factions left deeper scars. He told himself the Empire protected those who remained loyal. Yet lately the loneliness pressed heavier. Power isolated as much as it shielded. Sophia Lang entered the private area with practiced elegance. Her emerald dress hugged her figure, auburn hair falling in soft waves. At 34, she carried the polished confidence of someone accustomed to fine rooms and finer company. They had been together nearly 2 years. She, the poised companion who understood his world without asking too many questions. Or so Vincent had believed. "You have outdone yourself again," she said, her voice smooth as she took in the candlelit table, the panoramic view, and the chilled bottle of premium champagne. "This is magnificent." "Only the best," Vincent replied, the corner of his mouth lifting in a half-smile that did not quite reach his eyes. He poured the champagne, the golden liquid catching the light. Their glasses clinked with a clear, resonant sound that lingered in the cool night air. The meal unfolded in courses of refined American cuisine: seared scallops with truffle essence, perfectly grilled steak with red wine reduction, crisp salads, and palate-cleansing sorbet. Throughout, Vincent studied Sophia more closely than usual. A subtle tension tightened her shoulders. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her face when she thought he was not looking. The inner conflict he carried: daily guilt over past decisions, the weight of protecting an empire built on both legitimate sweat and darker dealings, made him hyper-aware of every small misalignment. "Is everything all right?" he asked between courses, his voice low and measured. "You seem distracted tonight." "Just overwhelmed by all this," Sophia replied, gesturing to the extravagant setting with a practiced smile, "and perhaps a little anxious about the surprise I have planned. It is not quite ready yet." Vincent nodded, though doubt crept like shadows at the edges of his thoughts. In 2 years, he had learned to read people with the same instinct that kept him alive on Chicago's unforgiving streets. Her words said one thing, but her body language whispered another. The remorse that lived inside him stirred again the gnawing sense that his life of calculated power had left little room for genuine trust. As the main plates were cleared, Sophia excused herself. "I need to freshen up before dessert," she said, brushing a light kiss against his cheek before disappearing toward the restrooms. Left alone, Vincent sipped his champagne and gazed out at the glittering city. His phone vibrated with messages from site managers and union contacts, but he ignored them. He had built his success by reading situations with uncanny accuracy. Right now, his instincts rang a low, persistent alarm he could not yet name. The guilt he carried over choices that once protected his family but cost him pieces of his humanity felt heavier tonight. The head chef appeared personally with 2 covered silver platters. "Mr. Callahan, our special dessert deep dish cannoli cake, with gold leaf and fresh raspberry sauce. The lady mentioned it was one of your favorites." Vincent thanked him, noting the detail. He had never discussed dessert preferences with Sophia. A small thing perhaps, but it registered in the growing list of quiet discrepancies. As the chef retreated, a sudden commotion near the entrance drew his attention. A small figure darted between the host and a security guard, weaving through tables with surprising agility. Within moments, a girl no older than 11 appeared at the edge of the private section, breathing hard. She wore a faded blue Cubs hoodie, several sizes too large, threadbare jeans with holes at the knees, and sneakers so worn the original color had long faded. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy ponytail. Her blue eyes, startlingly bright against a face marked by exhaustion, locked onto Vincent with desperate urgency. The child's appearance struck him like a physical blow. She was painfully thin cheeks, hollow from months, perhaps years of hunger. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from too many sleepless nights on cold streets or overcrowded shelter floors. Windburn chapped her skin. Her small hands trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of the table. This was poverty at its most extreme. A child who had endured freezing winter nights huddled in doorways, scavenging scraps from dumpsters behind diners, dodging dangers no child should ever face. The stark contrast to the luxury surrounding them made Vincent's chest tighten with an unexpected surge of protective instinct. "Don't eat that cake," she whispered urgently, pointing to the covered platters. "She put something bad in yours. Switch the plates when she is not looking. Please." Vincent stared, momentarily speechless. "Who are you? How did you?" Security moved in quickly. "I am sorry, Mr. Callahan. This street kid slipped in through the service entrance. We will remove her immediately." The girl pulled against the guard's grip, her voice trembling but determined. "Switch the plates. When she is not looking. I heard them talking. Something bad." Her eyes held no lie, only raw, fierce survival, and a moral clarity that cut through the night. Before Vincent could respond further, the guard escorted her away despite her struggles. He caught one last glance of her small frame disappearing toward the exit. The manager appeared, apologizing profusely for the breach. Left alone with the covered desserts, Vincent faced an absurd dilemma. The rational part of his mind, the one that had negotiated million-dollar contracts and stared down rival crews, dismissed the warning as impossible. Yet the intuitive side that had saved him from countless betrayals could not ignore the girl's desperate intensity. Those blue eyes had carried the weight of too many unjust hardships. His inner turmoil deepened. Guilt over his own past, the violent choices, the abandoned responsibilities, the brother he could not save, clashed violently with the sudden, overwhelming surge of compassion. Why had a child living in absolute misery risked everything to warn a stranger? The question tore at him. He glanced toward the restrooms. Sophia was still absent. With a swift movement that surprised even himself, Vincent switched the positions of the platters. His heart pounded. The inner conflict raged. Part of him recoiled at the absurdity. Another part felt a fierce protective fire ignite for the first time in years. He had just settled back when Sophia returned her makeup, refreshed her smile, dazzling. "Dessert has arrived," Vincent said casually, though his pulse raced. The chef called it deep dish cannoli cake. "Are they your favorite?" Sophia asked, taking her seat. "I made sure they prepared it specially." They lifted the covers simultaneously. Identical golden-brown cannoli cake sat before them, garnished with delicate gold leaf and swirls of raspberry sauce. It looked divine. Sophia picked up her spoon with practiced grace. "Shall we?" Vincent pretended to take a small bite, then set his spoon down to reach for his wine. "This pairing is excellent," he commented, watching carefully as Sophia took a generous portion. She savored it, murmuring approval. For the next 20 minutes, he maintained the charade, moving the dessert around his plate, while engaging in light conversation about upcoming charity events and weekend plans. All the while, he watched her. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Then, as they finished their coffee, Sophia rubbed her temple. "Headache?" he asked, concern edging his voice. "Just a slight one," she replied, pressing harder. "Probably too much champagne." Minutes later, her hands began to tremble as she reached for her water. A thin sheen of perspiration appeared on her forehead despite the perfect temperature. Vincent's alarm grew, confirming the unthinkable. The girl's warning had been real. "Perhaps we should call it a night," he suggested. "You do not seem well." "No," Sophia insisted, her voice strained. "I am fine. Besides, I have a surprise for you. It should be arriving any minute." Her phone chimed. Vincent glimpsed the message as she checked it. "Nothing yet." "It should have worked by now." Her expression flickered with confusion, then concern. She slid the phone away too quickly. Everything inside Vincent shifted violently. The remorse he carried daily now collided with fierce protectiveness, not just for himself, but for the small, malnourished girl who had risked arrest and worse to save a stranger. The inner turmoil tore at him. How many times had he failed to protect the innocent? How many unjust cruelties had he allowed in the name of survival? As Sophia's condition deteriorated, words slurring slightly, tremors worsening, Vincent signaled for the check while discreetly securing her phone. He called for medical help. The rooftop erupted into controlled chaos as paramedics arrived. In the ambulance sitting beside the semi-conscious woman, Vincent's thoughts returned again and again to the street girl. Her hollow cheeks, her trembling hands, the absolute poverty that had stripped her of every comfort a child deserved. The image burned into his mind, stirring something deep and paternal he had long buried. Later that night, after providing statements at the hospital and learning the toxin was real, Vincent could not rest. The gnawing guilt intensified. He had lived with power and wealth while children like her endured wind-filled nights, hunger that never eased and humiliations that broke spirits daily. Unreasonable situations piled one upon another. Shelters full landlords evicting without mercy, a system that offered little protection to a child with no one left. He instructed his driver to head toward the South Side shelters. The contrast hit harder with every block. Towering glass buildings gave way to worn neighborhoods where poverty pressed close. His penthouse in the Gold Coast waited with its soaring ceilings, private elevator, and panoramic views of the lake. Yet somewhere in the shadows, a thin, sleep-deprived girl with blue eyes had shown more courage than many men in his world. The search began in earnest. Vincent's team moved discreetly, avoiding drawing rival attention. Street confrontations loomed, tense exchanges with rival crew lookouts who sensed an intrusion into their territory. One confrontation near an underpass grew heated when a group blocked his path, demanding to know why a man like him was asking questions about a street kid. Vincent stood firm, voice low and commanding, diffusing the moment with calculated words and the quiet weight of his reputation. No fists flew, but the air crackled with threat. The encounter only deepened his resolve. He would not let another innocent slip through the cracks as he once had. Hours stretched. Exhaustion clouded his mind, yet the inner conflict burned brighter. Remorse over his past failures mixed with a sudden, overwhelming surge of love, not romantic, but fiercely protective and paternal. This child, whoever she was, had reached into his hollow empire and awakened something he thought long dead. He needed to find her, not out of debt, but because the thought of her returning to those cold, humiliating streets tore at him violently. As dawn broke in soft watercolor hues over Lake Michigan, Vincent's driver circled once more near a known shelter area. "Sir," the driver ventured, "perhaps we should rest and resume later." "One more pass," Vincent insisted, rubbing his eyes. The guilt and remorse churned inside him like a storm. Then he saw her, a small figure in the faded Cubs hoodie, sitting on a bench near the park edge, watching early morning joggers with weary eyes. "Stop here," he said quietly. He approached slowly, heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. The girl spotted him. For a moment she tensed, ready to run. Then something in his expression made her pause. "You switched the plates," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." Vincent sat at a respectful distance. "You saved my life. I need to understand how you knew." The child studied him with eyes far too old for her young face. She pulled her knees to her chest, a defensive posture born of too many betrayals. "I listen," she whispered. "People do not notice kids like me. We are invisible." "Not to me," Vincent replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Not anymore." Her name was Lily. She was 11, almost 12. Her mother, a kind, struggling single woman named Maria, had passed years earlier from illness, leaving Lily to survive on the streets and in temporary shelters. The poverty she described in soft, timid words was heartbreaking nights. So cold, her thin frame shook uncontrollably. Days when the only food came from half-eaten sandwiches discarded behind diners, constant fear of violence, or authorities that might separate her further. Unjust situations piled one upon another. Shelters full landlords evicting without mercy. A system that offered little protection to a child with no one left. Vincent listened, the inner turmoil reaching a violent crescendo. Guilt over his own distant past clashed with fierce responsibility. He felt an overwhelming surge of paternal love from the very first moments. A deep, protective compassion that demanded he shield this vulnerable girl from any more suffering. She was powerless, desperate, and utterly alone. He was wealthy beyond measure, powerful enough to change fates. The emotional conflict tore at him. Could a man with blood on his hands truly offer safety? Yet the answer came clear, and fierce he must try. "Lily," he said gently, "would you allow me to buy you breakfast? No strings attached, just food." Suspicion warred with hunger in her eyes. Hunger won. They sat in a worn booth at a simple Southside diner. Lily devoured pancakes and eggs with the intensity of someone who never knew when the next meal would come. Vincent sipped coffee, giving her space. His phone buzzed with urgent messages about rival tensions, but for the first time in years, the Empire felt secondary. Later that morning, as they spoke quietly, Lily's soft, polite voice carried both fear and cautious curiosity. "Why are you being kind to me? You do not know me." "Because you were kind to me first," Vincent answered, his voice rough with emotion. Inside, the remorse and guilt battled against a growing determination. He would protect her. He would offer the stability she had never known. The fatherly bond ignited in that simple diner booth, quiet, condensed, yet profoundly moving. The inner worlds of both were already tearing and healing in equal measure. For Lily, sudden safety brought disorientation, numbness, and dizzying confusion alongside faint hope. For Vincent, the encounter stripped bare his emotional isolation, forcing him to confront the hollowness of power without purpose. The stark gap between his Gold Coast luxury and her street-level misery only intensified the conflict. The sterile lights of Chicago General Hospital cast long shadows across the waiting area. Vincent Callahan sat motionless in a leather chair that felt too soft for the storm raging inside him. The city's distant hum filtered through the windows, but his mind remained fixed on the small girl in the faded Cubs hoodie. Sophia Lang, or whoever she truly was, lay in a guarded room, stabilized but still unconscious from the toxin meant for him. Doctors had confirmed it would have caused a fatal heart attack within hours. The betrayal cut deep, yet it paled against the image of hollow cheeks and trembling hands that refused to leave him. His phone buzzed with updates from his head of security. Rival factions were already whispering on the streets, sensing weakness after the rooftop incident. Vincent's empire built on towering construction projects that reshaped the Chicago skyline and quieter networks that ensured loyalty suddenly felt fragile. Guilt gnawed at him with renewed violence. He had survived by reading people, by staying one step ahead of threats, yet he had allowed someone close enough to strike. Worse, a child living in absolute misery had stepped into danger to save him. The inner tearing intensified until it felt like his chest might split open. How many times had he chosen power over protection? The loss of his younger brother flashed again, a street confrontation years earlier that ended in irreversible silence. Remorse consumed him, mixing with a fierce paternal surge that burned hotter with every passing hour. Next morning, as soft sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds, Detective Harris arrived with a folder of preliminary findings. The poison linked to a rival crew operating out of the South Side, aiming to dismantle Vincent's control over key union contracts and development sites. "This was no random act, Mr. Callahan," the detective said gravely. "They wanted it to look natural. Your companion is cooperating minimally, but we need more." Vincent nodded, his gray eyes sharp despite the sleepless night. Inside, violent conflict tore at him. The powerful man who commanded respect across Chicago now felt the weight of every unjust choice that had built his world. He excused himself and instructed his driver to head south. The contrast struck like a physical blow as the luxury sedan moved from the gleaming Gold Coast towers to worn South Side streets. His penthouse awaited with its soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, private elevator, requiring a security key, and rooms filled with understated elegance that spoke of millions spent without thought. Yet here, poverty pressed in from every corner, buildings with boarded windows, families huddled against the wind, children who should have been in school instead learning survival. Street confrontations began almost immediately. Near a known drop-in center, a group of men associated with the rival faction stepped into the path of his vehicle. The air crackled with tension as one leaned against the hood, eyes hard. "Heard you're asking questions about a street kid, Callahan. This ain't your territory. Keep pushing and things get complicated." Vincent lowered the window, voice calm, but carrying the quiet authority of a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals and stared down worse threats. "I am looking for someone who did the right thing. That does not concern your crew." Words were exchanged, bold, veiled warnings, but no violence erupted. The group eventually stepped aside. Yet the encounter left Vincent's heart pounding with protective fury. He would not let rival shadows touch the child who had risked everything. Hours later, his team located the shelter, a modest building offering temporary refuge for youth. Sister Margaret, a tired but kind woman in her 50s, met him at the entrance. "We do not give out information easily, sir. These children have been failed too many times." Vincent understood her caution. Standing in his tailored suit against the backdrop of peeling paint and worn furniture, he felt the disparity acutely. "My name is Vincent Callahan. The girl saved my life last night. I need to thank her and ensure she is safe. She may be in danger because of what she witnessed." The sister studied him carefully before softening. "That sounds like Lily. She comes and goes. Smart as a whip but wary. Thin as a rail from too many nights without proper meals. She and her friend Tommy often share whatever scraps they find." Vincent's remorse deepened to a violent ache. Lily, the name echoed in his mind. He pictured her again, painfully thin frame, malnourished body, that spoke of endless hunger, sleep-deprived eyes, shadowed by nights spent in doorways, where cold wind whipped without mercy, humiliated by the constant scramble for basics that other children took for granted. Unreasonable cruelties had stripped her dignity shelters, turning her away when full, authorities viewing her with suspicion rather than compassion. A system that left a child scavenging dumpsters behind diners while he dined on rooftops overlooking the city. Later that afternoon, they found Lily and her loyal best friend Tommy near an abandoned lot not far from the shelter. Tommy, also around 11, stood protectively in front of Lily, his own clothes threadbare and face marked by the same exhaustion. Both children looked ready to bolt at the sight of the expensive car and the powerful man stepping out. Lily's blue eyes widened in recognition, then filled with a mix of fear and guarded curiosity. She swayed slightly, a wave of dizziness washing over her from lack of proper rest and food. You switched the plates," she whispered, her voice soft, timid, and polite despite the tremor. "Are you okay, mister?" Vincent knelt to her level, maintaining respectful distance. The sight of her so small, so powerless against the world's indifference, ignited an overwhelming surge of paternal love that burned intensely from the very first moment. This was no mere gratitude. It was a fierce, protective attachment that tore at his heart with violent conflict. He who had built an empire through calculated strength now felt consumed by remorse for every child like her. He had never noticed while climbing higher. "I am fine because of you, Lily. You were incredibly brave." Tommy crossed his arms, distrust clear in his stance. "We do not need help from guys like you. People with money and power only make things worse for kids like us." The words struck Vincent like a physical blow. He saw the absurdity of the moment, a wealthy, influential man standing before two destitute children who had endured humiliations he could barely imagine. Yet in the quiet stillness that followed as a light breeze carried the distant sound of city traffic, something shifted. Lily's guarded expression softened into cautious curiosity mixed with shock and confusion. She took a small step forward, then faltered as numbness and disorientation made her head spin. Vincent steadied her gently with a hand on her shoulder, the touch careful and fatherly. Weeks later, after discreet arrangements and multiple tense street encounters where rival lookouts tested his resolve with bold questions and veiled threats, Vincent brought both children to his Gold Coast penthouse. The private elevator ascended smoothly, opening directly into the foyer. Lily and Tommy stood frozen eyes wide at the soaring ceilings, the wall of windows framing Lake Michigan in breathtaking panorama, the understated luxury of furniture chosen by the city's finest designers. The disparity was overwhelming here, warmth and safety. Outside the cold wind and uncertainty they had known for so long. Lily's small hand trembled as she touched the soft fabric of a couch. "This is bigger than any shelter we have ever seen," she said softly, her voice polite, yet laced with fear and deep disorientation. She felt dizzy again, the sudden shift from street survival to this world of plenty numbing her senses. Horror flickered in her eyes. What if this kindness vanished, like so many false hopes before Tommy remained guarded, whispering warnings to Lily when he thought Vincent could not hear? Do not trust him too fast. Powerful men always want something. Vincent's inner world tore violently. In the quiet, condensed stillness of the living room as the children explored cautiously, remorse crashed over him like waves. He had lived with every comfort while Lily endured sleep-deprived nights, shaking from cold scavenging for scraps, facing unjust rejections at every turn. The paternal love surged stronger, passionate, and intense, demanding he shield her and Tommy, her loyal friend, from any further pain. Yet guilt over his own past darkened the moment. Could a man whose hands carried the weight of difficult choices truly offer the pure protection they deserved? The conflict raged, leaving him breathless with its intensity. One evening, as golden hour light bathed the penthouse, Lily sat on the terrace wrapped in a plush blanket, far too large for her thin frame. She spoke in halting, timid words about her mother Maria, a kind, single woman who had worked tirelessly until illness took her, leaving Lily to the streets. Unfair events poured out nights when shelters had no space, forcing her and Tommy to huddle together against biting wind. Days of humiliating hunger that made her head spin and balance falter. Constant anxiety that authorities might separate them forever. Tommy added his own stories, voice cracking with the shared torment of children failed by every system. Vincent listened, the inner tearing reaching a crescendo. Extreme psychological shock gripped him, the realization that he might have crossed paths with Maria years ago in his younger, harder days, without knowing the child she left behind. Remorse mixed with burning determination. He felt an overwhelming attachment, a fatherly love so fierce it reshaped his priorities in an instant. These children, once invisible in their poverty, now stood at the center of his world. In the days that followed, more street confrontations tested him. Rivals, sensing his distraction, blocked paths during a supply run to the shelter, their bold words carrying threats of exposure. Vincent diffused each with commanding calm, yet each encounter heightened the suspense and deepened his resolve to create safety for Lily and Tommy. Later that night, as the city lights twinkled below like distant stars, Vincent stood at the windows while the children slept in guest rooms prepared with simple comforts. The quiet, emotional stillness wrapped around him, but inside the storm raged on gnawing guilt over past failures, violent conflict between the powerful man he had become and the protector he now desperately wanted to be. Lily's soft voice from earlier echoed, "Why would someone like you care about kids like us?" The answer burned clear in his heart. Because she had reminded him what humanity looked like when stripped of power. Because in her blue eyes he saw the child he needed to save, not out of debt, but out of a love that had ignited fiercely the moment their paths crossed. The journey had only begun, but already the hollow empire felt transformed. Compassion, responsibility, and the slow healing of old wounds pulled Vincent forward, even as inner turmoil threatened to tear him apart. For the first time in years, he understood that true strength might lie in protecting the most vulnerable rather than conquering the next rival. Later that night, the private elevator hummed softly as it carried Vincent Callahan, Lily, and Tommy upward through the heart of his Gold Coast tower. The doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, revealing soaring ceilings, a wall of windows framing the glittering expanse of Lake Michigan, and understated luxury that spoke of millions invested without hesitation. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over polished marble floors and carefully chosen furnishings. For Vincent, this was simply home, a fortress of safety and comfort built atop his vast construction empire. For the two children, it was another world entirely. Lily stood perfectly still, her thin frame swallowed by the faded Cubs hoodie, her worn sneakers looking painfully out of place on the pristine floor. Her blue eyes widened in shock and confusion, the sudden shift from cold street corners to this warmth making her dizzy. She swayed slightly, a wave of numbness washing over her, as if the ground beneath her feet had vanished. Tommy remained close, his own threadbare clothes and guarded posture a silent shield. Both children looked impossibly small against the grandeur, their malnourished bodies bearing the marks of countless nights enduring biting wind and hunger that gnawed without mercy. "You live here alone?" Lily asked, her voice soft, timid, and polite, appropriate for an 11-year-old addressing someone much older. There was fear in her tone mixed with heightened curiosity and deep disorientation. The luxury felt unreal, like a dream that would shatter the moment she trusted it. "I do," Vincent replied gently, his powerful frame contrasting sharply with their fragility. Inside, his heart tore with increasing violence. The disparity struck him like a physical blow, his world of private elevators, panoramic views, and effortless comfort against the absolute extremity of their poverty. Lily and Tommy had survived on scraps, scavenged from dumpsters behind Southside diners, sleeping in doorways where cold wind whipped through thin layers, facing humiliating rejections when shelters filled beyond capacity. Unreasonable and unjust situations had defined their young lives, authorities viewing them with suspicion rather than compassion. a system that offered no stable ground nights so cold. Their small bodies shook uncontrollably until dawn. The image of them huddled together for warmth, while he slept in silk sheets, filled him with gnawing remorse that bordered on physical pain. Mrs. Chen, his longtime housekeeper, appeared from the kitchen with her usual professional calm. Her expression flickered briefly at the sight of the two ragged children before smoothing into kindness. "Mr. Callahan, shall I prepare the guest suites?" "Please, the blue and green rooms," Vincent said. "Something simple for dinner as well." As Mrs. Chen moved efficiently to make arrangements, Vincent showed the children to their spaces. The blue room featured a large bed with soft linens, a private bathroom with a deep soaking tub and windows offering views of the sparkling city lights. The green room next door mirrored the comfort. Clean clothes, simple but new in soft fabrics, had been laid out, along with toiletries that smelled of fresh lavender. Lily touched the edge of the bed hesitantly, as if afraid it might disappear. A wave of anxiety and horror crossed her face. "This is all for us," she whispered. "We have never had anything like this." Her voice trembled with polite gratitude, yet beneath it lay violent inner turmoil. The mindset of a child once desperately poor, now suddenly surrounded by protection and plenty. She felt dizzy again, numbness spreading as the contrast overwhelmed her senses. Tommy paced the room, distrust etched deep in his young features. Next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows as breakfast was served on the terrace. Fresh pancakes with blueberries, scrambled eggs, and warm fruit filled the table, a simple meal by Vincent's standards, yet a feast the children devoured, with focused intensity born of long uncertainty. Lily ate carefully, her small hands still trembling slightly from years of scarcity. Tommy remained watchful, his eyes flicking toward the door, as if expecting everything to be taken away. "Why are you doing this?" Tommy asked bluntly during a quiet moment, his voice carrying the guarded suspicion of a boy who had learned early that powerful men brought trouble. "Guys like you with big houses and fancy cars do not help kids from the streets without wanting something back." The words landed heavily. Vincent felt the inner tearing intensify to a violent crescendo. Remorse clawed at him as he remembered his own climb from hardship, the choices that had hardened him, the brother he could not save. He, a wealthy and powerful man who commanded respect across Chicago's construction world and quieter networks, now sat before two children whose utter misery exposed every flaw in his empire. The paternal love that had ignited so fiercely burned hotter, a passionate and intense attachment that demanded he prove himself worthy of their trust. Yet guilt raged in conflict. Could his hands marked by difficult decisions truly offer the pure safety they deserved? "I do not want anything except to keep you safe," Vincent answered honestly, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "You both showed me more courage than most adults I know. That matters." Lily looked up, her blue eyes, a mixture of fear, guarded curiosity, and faint hope. "Tommy is right to worry," she said softly, her tone polite and timid. "We have seen too many unfair things. Shelters that turn us away when it rains too hard. Days when the only food is half a sandwich someone threw away. Nights so cold we cannot stop shaking." Her words painted a heartbreaking picture of their reality. Sleep-deprived bodies enduring humiliating poverty, powerless against a world that seemed designed to break them. The absurdity of their suffering, while Vincent's empire provided every comfort, tore at his heart with fresh violence. Later that afternoon, tension escalated when Vincent's security team reported movement from rival factions. A bold street confrontation unfolded near the tower's service entrance as Vincent stepped out briefly to handle a union matter. A group of men linked to the rival crew blocked his path, their voices low and threatening. "Heard you got street kids in your fancy tower, Callahan. Mixing with the wrong crowd can make powerful enemies nervous." The air crackled with suspense. Vincent stood firm, his commanding presence and calm words, diffusing the moment without escalation, yet the encounter left his protective instincts blazing. He would not allow shadows from his world to touch Lily and Tommy. Weeks later, the penthouse had begun to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a fragile home. Quiet moments of condensed emotional stillness became precious. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Lily sat curled on the oversized couch wrapped in a thick blanket, her thin frame finally warm for the first time in memory. Tommy sat nearby, still guarded but less hostile. Vincent joined them with mugs of hot cocoa, a simple American comfort that brought hesitant smiles. In the stillness, Lily spoke again in her soft voice. "My mom used to tell stories when we had nothing. She said kindness was the only thing nobody could take away." Her words carried deep inner torment, the pain of losing her mother to illness, the humiliating scramble for survival afterward, the anxiety that every good thing would vanish. She felt a wave of disorientation, her head spinning with the new reality of safety and care. Tommy nodded. adding his own stories of foster homes that failed and streets that offered no mercy, his distrust cracking only slightly as Vincent listened without judgment. Vincent's heart tore violently in the quiet. The gnawing remorse grew unbearable. Every luxury surrounding them highlighted the absurd unfairness the children had endured. His paternal love surged with overwhelming intensity, a burning attachment that reshaped his priorities. He wanted nothing more than to shield them, to heal the wounds of their past through consistent protection and compassion. Yet the conflict raged. A powerful man whose empire demanded strength now questioned whether his world of influence could truly nurture innocence. The psychological shock of seeing himself through their eyes left him numb and breathless. One tense afternoon, another street confrontation tested his resolve. While accompanying a supply delivery to the shelter where Lily and Tommy once stayed rival lookouts, appeared unexpectedly their bold questions laced with suspicion. Why the sudden interest in street kids, Callahan? Your empire getting soft? Vincent diffused the moment with measured authority, yet the suspense lingered, reinforcing his determination to create a barrier of safety around the children. Later that night, as the city lights twinkled below, Vincent stood at the terrace railing while Lily and Tommy slept. Mrs. Chen had helped transform the guest rooms with softer touches, books, drawing supplies, and warm pajamas. In the condensed stillness, Vincent felt the inner tearing reach new depths. Extreme psychological shock gripped him as he reflected on Lily's polite gratitude and Tommy's cautious loyalty. These children, once invisible in their poverty, now occupied the center of his heart. The disparity between his wealth and their former misery evoked tears he rarely allowed, not for himself, but for every unjust night they had suffered while he built towers that touched the sky. The first sparks of healing flickered in small acts. Lily helping Mrs. Chen in the kitchen with simple tasks, her thin hands gaining confidence. Tommy accepting a new jacket without immediate suspicion. Vincent felt the paternal bond deepening with every timid smile from Lily and every reluctant thank you from Tommy. His remorse transformed into fierce responsibility. He would fight for them against rivals, against the system that had failed them, against the ghosts of his own past. Yet the drama escalated in quiet ways that tore at all their inner worlds. Lily woke one night from a nightmare of cold streets, dizzy and disoriented, only to find Vincent sitting vigil in the hallway, his powerful presence now a source of unexpected comfort. "You are safe," he whispered. In that moment, her guarded fear began shifting toward overwhelming trust and attachment. Tommy watched from the doorway, his distrust softening as he witnessed genuine care. The penthouse, once a symbol of hollow power, now echoed with the tentative sounds of healing soft laughter over breakfast, quiet conversations that bridged vast worlds. Vincent's inner conflict burned hotter than ever, the wealthy, powerful man torn between his empire and the profound need to be the father these children deserved. Lily and Tommy, rescued from the extremes of poverty, began to believe, however, fearfully, that kindness could last. The journey of trust had only just begun, but already the sparks of healing illuminated the darkness, promising a future where compassion could mend even the deepest wounds. Later that night, the penthouse lay wrapped in soft silence, broken only by the distant hum of Chicago traffic far below. Vincent Callahan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the glittering lights of the city he had helped shape with steel and concrete. The luxury surrounding him, the warm glow of recessed lighting, the plush rugs underfoot, the private terrace overlooking Lake Michigan, felt heavier than ever. His empire of towering skyscrapers and influential unions had always been his armor. Tonight it felt like a cage. In the guest rooms, Lily and Tommy slept fitfully, Lily's thin frame curled beneath layers of soft blankets, her malnourished body finally warm after years of enduring icy wind that cut through threadbare clothes on frozen Southside streets. Tommy lay in the next room, still tense, even in sleep, his young face marked by the exhaustion of too many nights, wondering if tomorrow would bring another shelter rejection or another humiliating search for scraps behind diners. Vincent's heart tore with increasing violence. The paternal love that had ignited so fiercely the moment he met Lily now burned like a flame inside his chest, passionate and intense. These children, once desperate, powerless, and invisible in their poverty, were now under his roof, yet the gnawing remorse refused to ease. How many cold nights had Lily and Tommy spent huddled together, bodies shaking from hunger and wind, while he negotiated million-dollar contracts in heated conference rooms? The disparity crushed him. His wealth allowed effortless comfort. Their past had offered only humiliation and survival. Next morning, sunlight poured across the terrace as Mrs. Chen served breakfast. Lily picked at her pancakes with hesitant movements, her voice soft and polite when she thanked Vincent. "This tastes like something from a dream," she whispered, but her blue eyes still carried guarded fear and lingering disorientation. Tommy ate more quickly, though his distrust remained a quiet shadow. "We are not used to food that does not run out," he said flatly. Vincent felt the inner conflict escalate. Every small gratitude from Lily sent waves of paternal attachment surging through him, yet every reminder of their former misery brought violent remorse. He wanted nothing more than to shield them forever. But the powerful man inside him questioned whether his world, with its hidden rivalries and street-level tensions, could truly be safe for innocent hearts. Later that afternoon, the first real test arrived without warning. A sharp knock echoed through the penthouse. Vincent's security team alerted him suspicious activity near the building's lower levels. Rival factions, sensing his distraction with the children, had grown bolder. Vincent moved quickly, instructing Mrs. Chen to keep Lily and Tommy inside the safer upper floors. He descended with 2 trusted men, stepping into the service area where the air smelled of concrete and rain. The confrontation unfolded in tense, unexpected silence at first. 3 men associated with a rival crew blocked the loading dock, their postures aggressive but voices low. "Word on the street is you are playing house with street kids now, Callahan. That kind of softness makes powerful people nervous. Maybe you should focus on your buildings instead of charity cases." The air crackled with suspense. Vincent stood tall, his fair-skinned face, calm gray eyes, steady with commanding authority. "These children are under my protection. That is not up for discussion." Words were exchanged, bold warnings wrapped in veiled threats, but no violence broke out. The rivals eventually withdrew, yet the encounter left Vincent's protective instincts blazing hotter. He would not allow his past world to touch Lily and Tommy. When he returned upstairs, he found Lily and Tommy waiting in the living room, their small faces pale with anxiety. Lily swayed slightly, a wave of dizziness and numbness washing over her as fear gripped her. "We heard voices downstairs," she said timidly, her voice polite despite the tremor. "Are bad people coming for us because of what I did at the restaurant?" The question tore Vincent's heart with fresh violence. He knelt to their level, the powerful man humbled by 2 children who had endured so much. In that quiet, condensed stillness, he felt extreme psychological shock. The realization that his empire, once a source of strength, now carried risks for the very ones he longed to protect. His paternal love surged with overwhelming intensity, a burning attachment that made every breath feel heavier with responsibility. Weeks later, another crisis erupted without mercy. One rainy evening, while Vincent was reviewing construction plans in his home office, the building's security system flared with alerts. Rival operatives had slipped past outer defenses and were attempting to access the service elevator. The drama escalated rapidly. Vincent moved with purpose, guiding Lily and Tommy toward the reinforced panic room hidden behind a bookshelf in the main living area. Lily's thin legs faltered as anxiety turned to horror. She felt deep disorientation, her balance wavering as old fears of abandonment flooded back. Tommy grabbed her hand, his own voice cracking with guarded fear. "We should have stayed on the streets. At least we knew the dangers there." Vincent's inner world ripped apart with violent intensity. The remorse was consuming. He had brought these children into his fortified world only to expose them to threats born from his own power. In the dim light of the panic room, as security handled the intrusion downstairs, the 3 of them huddled together. Lily's small, malnourished frame trembled against him. "I am scared," she whispered in her soft, timid voice. Everything good always gets taken away. In that moment of condensed emotional stillness, surrounded by the quiet hum of the reinforced walls, Vincent felt the paternal bond deepen to a breaking point. His love for Lily, and by extension for loyal Tommy, burned with passionate fierceness. These children who had survived sleep-deprived nights in freezing wind, humiliating hunger, and absurdly unfair rejections from every system meant to help them, now looked to him for safety. The contrast with his own wealth, the penthouse's warmth, the stocked kitchen, the private security only amplified his gnawing guilt. How could he, a man who had made difficult choices to survive, now offer them the pure protection they deserved? Street smarts from the children proved decisive. As security neutralized the threat below without escalation, Lily suddenly spoke up in the panic room. Her voice, though timid, carried surprising clarity. "There is another way out, the old service stairs behind the kitchen. We used to sneak through places like that on the south side. Sometimes the locks are the same." Tommy nodded quickly, adding details only streetwise eyes would notice. Their quick thinking allowed Vincent's team to anticipate and block a secondary approach the rivals had planned. When the all-clear came, Vincent emerged with the children, his heart pounding with a mixture of relief and profound awe. Lily and Tommy had saved him again, not with force, but with the resilient knowledge born from their former life of extreme poverty. The drama left everyone shaken. Lily collapsed onto the couch afterward, dizzy and numb from the rush of fear and confusion. Tommy sat beside her, his distrust cracking further as he watched Vincent check on them with genuine care. Later that night, in the quiet after the storm, Vincent sat with them on the terrace under the soft glow of outdoor heaters. Rain had cleared, leaving the city lights sparkling like diamonds on wet pavement. Lily's small hand reached tentatively for her touchlight, and trusting for the first time. "You stayed with us," she said softly, her polite voice carrying layers of overwhelming attachment mixed with lingering anxiety. Nobody ever stayed before. Vincent felt the inner tearing reach a new violent crescendo. Extreme psychological shock gripped him as he held her fragile hand. He, the wealthy and powerful man whose empire commanded respect across Chicago, now sat humbled by two children who had endured more injustice than most adults. The remorse over his past, the choices that had hardened him, the brother he could not save, the rivals who now threatened what mattered most, clashed violently with the burning paternal love that demanded he become better. He wanted to shield them from every cold night, every humiliating rejection, every absurd unfairness life had thrown at them. Tommy watched quietly, his guarded expression softening into cautious curiosity. "Maybe you are not like the others," he murmured. In the condensed emotional stillness that followed, with the three of them breathing, the same cool, night air healing sparks continued to glow. Lily shared fragments of her past in timid whispers. Nights when hunger made her head spin and balance fail. Days when shelters turned them away despite pouring rain. The constant fear that she and Tommy would be separated forever. Each story exposed the pitiful reality of their former lives. Thin bodies weakened by malnutrition. Sleep-deprived eyes, shadowed by survival spirits, worn down by a world that offered no mercy. Vincent listened, his powerful frame still, yet his heart raging with conflict. His love for these children had become a fierce protective force that reshaped everything. No longer was the empire the center of his world. Lily and Tommy were. The disparity between his luxury and their past misery evoked deep moving emotion, tears he held back only through sheer will. As weeks turned into a gentle rhythm of tentative trust, more small confrontations with rival elements tested Vincent on the streets below. Each time he diffused the tension with commanding presence, and careful words heightening the suspense while reinforcing his vow to keep the children safe. Lily's street smarts and Tommy's loyalty continued to surprise and save in quiet ways, noticing a suspicious car suggesting a safer route, offering simple insights that only those who had once been invisible could provide. One quiet evening, as golden light bathed the penthouse, Lily looked up at Vincent with eyes no longer fully guarded. "Thank you for not sending us back," she said softly. The simple words carried the weight of overwhelming trust and attachment that had grown from suspicion to something profound and burning. Vincent pulled both children close, in a careful, fatherly embrace, the inner turmoil still raging, yet now tempered by purpose. His remorse, guilt, and violent conflict had not vanished, but they were slowly being reshaped by compassion and responsibility. The street kids who had once saved a powerful man were now being saved in return, and in the process healing the deepest wounds in his heart. The journey remained long, filled with both quiet stillness and escalating drama, but the first true sparks of healing had taken root. For Vincent, Lily, and Tommy, a new chapter of family chosen fierce and redemptive had begun to unfold. Later that night, after the intrusion had been neutralized, the penthouse settled into an uneasy quiet. Vincent Callahan paced the dimly lit living room, the city lights of Chicago sparkling far below like indifferent stars. The luxury around him, the soft glow of recessed lighting on marble floors, the deep leather sofas, the private terrace with its breathtaking view of Lake Michigan, felt both comforting and suffocating. His empire of towering construction projects and influential unions had always provided control. Now it threatened the very children he had sworn to protect. In the guest rooms, Lily and Tommy slept with the exhaustion that follows fear. Lily's thin, malnourished frame was curled beneath layers of warm blankets, her body finally free from the biting wind that had once whipped through her threadbare clothes on frozen South Side streets. Tommy lay nearby, his young face still etched with the remnants of distrust even in sleep. Vincent's heart tore with growing violence. The paternal love that burned so fiercely for Lily and extended protectively to loyal Tommy now clashed violently with gnawing remorse. These children had endured absolute poverty nights, so cold their small bodies shook uncontrollably, days of humiliating hunger where the only food came from, discarded scraps behind diners, endless anxiety of shelters turning them away or authorities separating them forever. The disparity crushed him. While he enjoyed effortless wealth, private elevators, stocked kitchens, and security that money could buy, they had survived on nothing but resilience and each other. The inner conflict raged. How could a powerful man whose hands carried the weight of difficult choices offer them the pure safety they deserved? Next morning, the legal storm began in earnest. Detective Harris arrived with a child services representative, Miss Washington, a tall, elegant woman with a warm yet professional demeanor. They sat in the sunlit study, surrounded by dark wood paneling and shelves lined with books. Vincent listened as they explained the process for temporary guardianship. Papers were spread across the table, forms, background checks, home study requirements. The scrutiny was intense, especially given Vincent's prominent position in Chicago's construction world and the whispers surrounding the rooftop incident. Lily and Tommy sat quietly on the couch nearby, their small frames looking even smaller against the elegant furniture. Lily's blue eyes darted between the adults, a mix of fear-guarded curiosity and deep disorientation washing over her. She felt dizzy again, numbness spreading as the conversation turned to her past. "Will they send us back?" she whispered in her soft, timid, polite voice when Miss Washington asked gentle questions about their life on the streets. The question struck Vincent like a physical blow. In the quiet, condensed stillness that followed, his remorse intensified to a violent ache. He pictured Lily and Tommy enduring absurdly unfair events, shelters full during pouring rain, forcing them to huddle in doorways, days when hunger made their heads spin and balance fail, the constant humiliating struggle for basic dignity. His paternal attachment surged with passionate intensity, a burning need to shield them from any further pain. Yet the inner tearing grew fiercer. Could his world of power and hidden rivalries truly provide the stable home they needed? Tommy remained more guarded, his voice carrying quiet suspicion. "We have seen adults make promises before. Then everything gets taken away." Miss Washington nodded with understanding, but the process moved forward with careful steps. Background checks, interviews, and evaluations would be required. Vincent's resources, his wealth, his legal team, his influence smoothed some paths, yet the disparity remained painfully clear. While he could afford the best attorneys and private tutors, Lily and Tommy had once owned nothing but the clothes on their backs and the street knowledge that had saved lives. Weeks later, Vincent's estranged sister Elizabeth arrived from Milwaukee with her husband David and their 2 children, Sophie and James. The family gathered in the penthouse living room, the atmosphere thick with cautious curiosity. Elizabeth, tall and elegant like her brother, embraced Vincent warmly before turning her attention to the children. "You must be the brave ones who saved my brother," she said kindly, kneeling to Lily's level rather than towering over her. Lily's voice was soft and polite, though anxiety made her hands tremble. "We just did what was right." She felt a wave of confusion and fear. Sudden attention from a real family felt overwhelming after years of being invisible and powerless. James, the younger cousin, asked direct questions with childlike fascination. "Did you really live on the streets? Was it scary?" Sophie offered a shy smile and a handmade card. Tommy stayed close to Lily, his distrust still present, but softening as the family showed genuine warmth. In the quiet moments that followed, Vincent felt extreme psychological shock. Watching Lily interact with his sister's family, her thin frame finally relaxed in clean clothes, her polite laughter, tentative but real, tore at his heart with violent intensity. Remorse consumed him. While his nieces and nephew had known stability, warmth, and plenty, Lily and Tommy had endured sleep-deprived nights in freezing wind, humiliating hunger, and the constant dread of separation. The absurdity of their suffering while he built an empire of glass and steel left him numb and breathless. Later that night, after the family had retired to guest rooms, Vincent sat with Lily and Tommy on the terrace. The city lights twinkled below like a sea of stars. Lily spoke in her soft voice about her mother Maria, a kind, single woman who had worked tirelessly until illness took her, leaving behind only memories and the struggle that followed. "After Mom was gone, everything became unfair," she whispered. "Shelters with no space. People looking at us like we were trouble. Nights when the wind was so cold we could not feel our fingers." Tommy added quietly, "We learned to be invisible. That was the only way to stay together." Vincent's inner world ripped apart. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned with overwhelming passion and intensity, a fierce attachment that demanded he become the father they had never had. Yet the conflict raged violently inside him, gnawing guilt over his own hardened past, the difficult choices that had built his power, the rivals who still lurked in the shadows. Could a man like him truly heal the wounds of children who had suffered so much? One tense afternoon, another street confrontation heightened the suspense. While Vincent was accompanying a delivery of supplies to the shelter where Lily and Tommy once stayed rival, lookouts appeared unexpectedly on a nearby corner. Their bold words carried veiled threats. "Your focus seems divided these days, Callahan. Kids from the streets can bring complications to a man in your position." Vincent stood firm, his commanding presence and calm authority diffusing the moment without escalation. Yet the encounter left him shaken, reinforcing how his world could endanger the very ones he sought to protect. Back at the penthouse, the emotional drama escalated in quiet, heart-wrenching ways. Lily experienced a moment of deep disorientation one evening when a social worker visited for an interview. The questions about her past triggered waves of anxiety and horror memories of cold nights' hunger that made her dizzy and weak, the powerless feeling of having no one to turn to. She swayed, slightly numbness spreading as she struggled to speak. Vincent sat beside her, his strong hand steady on her shoulder, offering silent support. In the condensed emotional stillness that followed the interview, Lily looked up at him with eyes filled with overwhelming trust. "You stayed," she said softly, her voice timid yet carrying profound attachment. Even when it got hard, Tommy watched from across the room, his guarded expression softening further. "Maybe this is real," he murmured. Vincent felt the inner tearing reach new depths. Extreme psychological shock gripped him as he held Lily's fragile trust in his hands. The disparity between his wealth, the penthouse's comfort, the ability to provide tutors, doctors, and safety, and the children's former life of utter misery, evoked tears he rarely allowed. He had once been a boy who understood hardship, yet he had climbed so high that he had forgotten what it meant to be truly powerless. Now these children reminded him daily. As weeks passed, the legal process continued with home studies, background reviews, and careful evaluations. Vincent's resources helped move things forward, but the emotional weight remained heavy. Late one night after everyone had gone to bed, Vincent stood alone on the terrace. The quiet, condensed stillness wrapped around him, yet inside his heart raged with violent conflict. Remorse for every moment Lily and Tommy had suffered, guilt over the dangers his world still carried, and the burning paternal love that demanded he fight for their future, all tore at him simultaneously. Lily's soft voice from earlier echoed in his mind. "You stayed." In that moment, Vincent made a silent vow. No matter how intense the inner storm became, no matter what rivals or legal hurdles arose, he would prove worthy of their trust. The powerful man who commanded Chicago's construction world was slowly being transformed by two small children who had once been invisible in their poverty. The bond between them grew stronger with every shared meal, every quiet conversation, every act of kindness. Lily's polite gratitude and Tommy's cautious loyalty became anchors in Vincent's turbulent heart. The legal storm raged on, but in the penthouse high above the city, the first true roots of family, chosen, compassionate, and healing, were taking hold. The journey remained filled with both quiet, emotional stillness and escalating inner drama, yet the path forward felt clearer. For Vincent, Lily, and Tommy, compassion and responsibility were slowly mending what years of hardship had broken. Later that night, the penthouse glowed with soft lamplight, while rain tapped gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Vincent Callahan stood alone on the terrace, the cool Chicago breeze carrying the distant scent of the lake. Below, the city lights stretched like a vast constellation, a reminder of the empire he had built: towering skyscrapers, powerful union alliances, and the quiet influence that kept everything running. Yet tonight, the luxury felt heavier than steel. His wealth surrounded him with effortless comfort, heated floors, plush robes, and a kitchen stocked with anything a person could desire. In stark contrast, the two children sleeping inside had once known only the cruel bite of wind on frozen streets. Nights so cold their thin bodies shook until dawn, and days of humiliating hunger that left them scavenging scraps behind South-side diners. Vincent's heart tore with increasing violence. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned like a steady flame, passionate and intense, while his protective care for Tommy had grown just as fierce. These children had saved him with their street smarts and courage, yet every reminder of their past misery filled him with gnawing remorse that bordered on physical pain. How many absurdly unfair nights had they endured shelters, turning them away in pouring rain, authorities viewing their small frames with suspicion rather than compassion, a system that left them powerless and invisible. The inner conflict raged. A powerful man whose hands carried the weight of difficult choices now longed to be the white percentage father they deserved. But doubt whispered that his world might still bring danger. Next morning, the turning point arrived quietly yet profoundly. Tommy had been watching Vincent more closely in recent days. The boy's guarded expression had begun to crack, but suspicion still lingered like morning fog over the lake. During breakfast on the terrace, Lily spoke in her soft, timid, polite voice about a simple memory. "My mom used to say that real kindness does not ask for anything back." She ate her pancakes slowly, her malnourished frame finally gaining a little strength, yet her blue eyes still carried traces of fear and confusion from years of survival. Tommy set down his fork, his voice carrying quiet challenge. "But powerful men always want something. We learned that the hard way on the streets, promises that disappear when the weather turns cold or when shelters fill up." Vincent felt the words strike deep. In the condensed emotional stillness that followed, with only the soft clink of silverware, and the distant hum of the city. Extreme psychological shock gripped him. He saw himself through Tommy's eyes, the wealthy man in the tailored shirt surrounded by luxury, while these children had once endured sleep-deprived nights in biting wind, bodies thin and weakened by constant hunger, dignity, stripped by one humiliating rejection after another. His remorse intensified to a violent crescendo, clashing with the burning paternal attachment that demanded he prove himself different. Later that afternoon, Vincent decided to act on a quiet idea. He arranged for a delivery of supplies to the shelter where Lily and Tommy had once stayed, warm blankets, new coats, and boxes of food. He went personally, wanting the children to see that kindness could be consistent. As the car pulled up near the modest building, rival lookouts appeared unexpectedly on the corner, their bold presence creating instant tension. One stepped forward, voice low and challenging. "Still playing hero with street kids, Callahan. That kind of attention draws the wrong eyes in our world." The air crackled with suspense. Vincent stood tall, his commanding presence, and measured words, diffusing the moment without escalation. "These children are not pawns. They are under my protection." The rivals eventually withdrew, but the encounter left Vincent's protective instincts blazing. He would not let shadows from his past touch the fragile trust growing in his home. When he returned, Tommy had slipped out briefly to the terrace, watching the city below with arms crossed. Vincent joined him in quiet stillness. "I saw what you did today," Tommy said after a long pause, his voice less guarded. "You did not have to go yourself. Most men with money just write checks and forget." Vincent knelt to the boy's level, his powerful frame humbled. "I wanted you to know it is real." Inside, his heart tore violently. Tommy's slow shift from distrust to cautious respect filled him with overwhelming paternal love, yet the gnawing remorse grew fiercer. These children had survived on nothing but each other, while he had built an empire of glass and steel. The disparity, his effortless wealth against their former life of cold wind hunger that made heads spin and balance fail, and absurdly unfair rejections evoked deep-moving emotion that brought tears close to the surface. Weeks later, the emotional layers deepened during a quiet family evening. Elizabeth and her family had extended their stay, filling the penthouse with gentle laughter and normalcy. Sophie taught Lily a simple card game on the living room floor, while James asked endless curious questions. Lily's voice remained soft and polite, but her smiles came more freely. "This feels like what families do in stories," she said timidly, though a flicker of anxiety still crossed her face. The fear that this warmth might vanish like so many false hopes before. In one condensed moment of stillness, as golden evening light bathed the room, Lily experienced a wave of deep disorientation. Memories of past hardships flooded back, nights when the wind cut through thin layers, days when hunger left her dizzy and powerless, the constant terror of being separated from Tommy. She swayed slightly, numbness spreading through her small frame. Vincent was beside her in an instant, his strong hand steady on her shoulder. "You are safe," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "This is your home now for as long as you want it." Lily looked up, her blue eyes filled with overwhelming trust and attachment that had grown from initial suspicion into something profound and burning. "You stayed even when the bad men came," she said softly. "Nobody ever stayed before." Tommy watched from across the room, his expression shifting fully in that moment. The turning point arrived as he witnessed Vincent's genuine care, not for show, but in the quiet, consistent way he checked on them, listened without judgment, and protected without demanding anything in return. Tommy's guarded walls finally crumbled. "Maybe you really mean it," he murmured, his voice carrying cautious loyalty for the first time. Vincent felt the inner tearing reach a violent new intensity. Extreme psychological shock washed over him as he realized these two children, once desperate, impoverished, and invisible in their misery, now looked at him with genuine trust. His remorse clashed violently with the fierce paternal love that consumed him. He had climbed from hardship to power, yet in doing so he had nearly forgotten what it meant to protect the vulnerable. Now Lily and Tommy reminded him daily, their polite gratitude and emerging smiles healing wounds he had long buried. One tense afternoon brought another street confrontation that heightened the suspense. While Vincent was handling a union matter near a construction site, rival elements appeared unexpectedly, their bold words laced with suspicion. "Your new family is making you soft, Callahan. Soft men lose everything in this city." Vincent diffused the moment with calm authority, yet the encounter reinforced how closely his two worlds now collided. He returned home shaken, the protective fire in his chest burning hotter than ever. Later that night in the quiet, after the children had gone to bed, Vincent sat with Elizabeth on the terrace. His sister studied him with knowing eyes. "This is about more than gratitude, isn't it?" she asked gently. Vincent nodded, his voice rough. "They saved me long before I could save them. Lily, she reminds me of everything I lost sight of." Tommy's loyalty shows me what real family can be. The inner conflict raged, gnawing guilt over past choices, violent remorse for every cold night the children had endured while he built his empire, and the overwhelming paternal attachment that demanded he change. The disparity felt unbearable. His world of private security and endless resources against their history of sleep-deprived survival, humiliating poverty, and absurdly unfair suffering. In the days that followed, small moments continued to heal. Lily helped Mrs. Chen in the kitchen with simple tasks, her thin hands gaining confidence. Tommy accepted new books and clothes without immediate suspicion, even offering a hesitant thank you that carried deep meaning. Quiet, condensed emotional stillness became treasured. Shared meals where laughter replaced fear, bedtime stories where Vincent's deep voice brought comfort instead of anxiety. One evening, as rain fell softly outside, Lily experienced another wave of shock and confusion. A social worker's routine visit triggered memories of past rejections, leaving her dizzy and numb. She reached for Vincent's hand, her voice timid, yet filled with attachment. "Promise you will not send us away when it gets hard." The simple plea tore Vincent's heart with violent intensity. In that moment, his love for these children, passionate, protective, and profoundly fatherly, solidified into unbreakable resolve. No matter how fiercely the inner storm raged, no matter what rivals or legal hurdles remained, he would prove worthy. These children, once powerless against the world's cruelty, had become his purpose. The turning point of trust had arrived. Distrust had given way to cautious loyalty, suspicion to overwhelming attachment. For Vincent, the wealthy and powerful man whose empire commanded respect, the journey had become something far greater. A path of redemption through compassion, responsibility, and the healing power of chosen family. The penthouse high above Chicago no longer felt like a hollow fortress. It echoed with the tentative but growing sounds of home-soft voices, shared stories, and the quiet promise that even the deepest wounds could mend when met with unwavering kindness. Later that night, the penthouse felt heavier than usual, the soft glow of city lights filtering through the windows like distant stars that offered no warmth. Vincent Callahan stood motionless on the terrace, the cool Chicago breeze carrying the faint scent of rain from Lake Michigan. Inside, Lily and Tommy slept in their rooms, their breathing steady after another day of tentative healing. The luxury surrounding Vincent, the heated marble floors, the panoramic views, the private security that money could buy without question only sharpened the ache in his chest. His empire of towering construction projects and quiet influence had always been his shield. Now it felt like chains. His phone had buzzed earlier with a message from Detective Harris. Sophia Lang, still in custody, had requested a private meeting. She claimed it was for closure. Vincent's instincts warned him against it. Yet something deeper, the need to understand the full betrayal that had nearly cost him everything, pulled him forward. The paternal love he felt for Lily and Tommy burned with fierce intensity, but the gnawing remorse refused to ease. These children had endured absolute poverty. Thin, malnourished bodies weakened by years of hunger, sleep-deprived eyes, shadowed by endless cold nights in doorways where wind whipped without mercy. Humiliating days of scavenging scraps while the world looked away. The disparity tore at him violently. While he commanded wealth and power, they had once been powerless against every unjust rejection and absurd cruelty life had thrown at them. Next morning, Vincent made the difficult journey to the detention center on the city's outskirts. The contrast struck like a physical blow as his luxury sedan moved from gleaming Gold Coast towers to the stark gray facility surrounded by high fences. Sophia sat across from him in the visiting room, her designer confidence replaced by standard-issue clothing and tired eyes. She had lost weight, yet carried herself with the same poise that had once drawn him in. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." Vincent's voice remained measured, though his heart pounded with inner turmoil. "I need to know why." Sophia's gaze dropped to her hands. She spoke of debt pressure from the rival crew, and a plan that had spiraled beyond her control. Then came the confession that shifted everything. "There is more you need to know. I discovered something early on. About the girl who warned you. Lily." Vincent tensed, the paternal surge of love for Lily flaring protectively. Sophia continued, her voice low. "I learned she was connected to you. Her mother, Maria, it was not random. I found old records. Lily is your biological daughter." The words landed like a thunderclap in the small room. Vincent felt extreme psychological shock crash over him, numbness spreading through his body as the world tilted. His fair-skinned face paled. Violent inner conflict tore at his heart with ferocious intensity, gnawing remorse for unknowingly abandoning his own child to the streets. Years of cold wind, hunger that left her dizzy and weak in humiliating survival, while he built an empire high above it all. The paternal love he had felt from the first moment now burned with overwhelming passionate force. Lily was his daughter. The realization numbed him, leaving him breathless and disoriented. Sophia kept speaking, but Vincent barely heard the rest. He rose abruptly, the meeting ending in stunned silence. As he left the detention center, the inner tearing reached a violent crescendo. How could he have failed his own flesh and blood so completely? The remorse was consuming, clashing with the fierce determination to protect Lily and Tommy at all costs. Later that afternoon, back in the penthouse, Vincent sat in heavy stillness while Lily and Tommy played a simple board game on the living room floor. Lily looked up with her soft, polite smile, her thin frame finally gaining strength in clean clothes and regular meals. "You look tired," she said timidly. "Did something bad happen?" Vincent struggled to find words. The disparity hit him harder than ever, his vast wealth providing every comfort, while Lily had once endured sleep-deprived nights, shaking from cold scavenging for food, and facing absurdly unfair rejections that stripped her of dignity. He felt dizzy with the weight of the revelation, numbness spreading as fatherly love and guilt battled violently inside him. Weeks later, the drama escalated during another tense street confrontation. Vincent had gone to a construction site to address a union issue when rival elements appeared unexpectedly, blocking his path near the loading area. Their bold words carried sharper threats this time. "We hear you are getting soft with family matters, Callahan. Street kids and old secrets can make a powerful man vulnerable." The air crackled with suspense. Vincent stood firm, his commanding presence diffusing the moment with calm authority. Yet the encounter left him shaken. The rivals seemed to know more than they should, hinting at deeper knowledge about Lily's connection to him. When he returned home, the emotional storm inside him raged fiercer. In a quiet, condensed moment on the terrace as evening light faded, Lily approached him hesitantly. She had been drawing with crayons. Mrs. Chen had provided simple pictures of a family under a starry sky. "I had a bad dream last night," she whispered, her voice soft and polite. "I was back on the streets, cold and alone. Then you were there, but you disappeared." A wave of anxiety and horror crossed her face, making her sway with dizziness and deep disorientation. She felt numb, the old fears of abandonment returning despite the safety around her. Vincent pulled her gently into a careful embrace, his powerful frame trembling with the intensity of his emotions. "I am not going anywhere," he said, voice rough. Inside, the revelation about her being his daughter tore at him with violent conflict. Remorse for every cold night she had suffered while he lived in luxury consumed him. His paternal love surged hotter than ever, passionate, protective, and profoundly deep. This child, once desperate and powerless in her poverty, was his own. The psychological shock left him breathless, the inner world ripping apart between guilt and the burning need to make things right. Tommy watched from the doorway, his loyalty now firm. "We believe you," he said quietly. "But the bad men outside, they keep coming closer." The turning point of trust had already happened, yet new layers of drama unfolded. One evening, as the family gathered for a simple dinner, Lily experienced another moment of shock and confusion. A phone call from Detective Harris brought news that rivals were digging into old records, possibly connected to Maria's past. Lily overheard fragments and froze, her small hands trembling. "They want to take us away?" she asked, in a timid voice filled with fear. The numbness returned, her balance faltering, as old humiliations flooded back, nights of wind and hunger, the powerless feeling of having nothing and no one. Vincent felt the inner tearing escalate to unbearable levels. Extreme psychological shock gripped him as he realized the depth of the conspiracy. Sophia's confession had only been the beginning. In a private moment later that night, after the children were asleep, Vincent learned the fuller truth through a discreet call with his most trusted advisor. The consigliere, the man he had relied on for years, had been working with the rivals all along. He had known about Lily's parentage from the beginning, and had deliberately kept the information hidden, even playing a role in ensuring Maria's illness went untreated, so no claim could ever threaten Vincent's empire. The betrayal cut deeper than any rival threat coming from inside the very family Vincent had trusted. The revelation left Vincent numb and disoriented in the quiet, condensed stillness of his office. His heart tore violently, gnawing remorse for failing his own daughter, violent conflict between the powerful man who had built everything through calculated strength and the father who now wanted only to protect and heal. The disparity felt crushing his world of luxury and influence against Lily's history of thin, malnourished survival, sleep-deprived nights, and freezing wind, an absurdly unfair suffering that no child should ever face. In the days that followed, Vincent shielded the children from the worst details, but the emotional weight pressed on all of them. Lily sensed the tension and reached for him more often, her soft voice carrying overwhelming trust. "You look sad," she said one afternoon, her polite curiosity mixed with genuine care. "Can I help?" Tommy added his quiet support, his loyalty now a steady anchor. "We are stronger together." Vincent held them both in a gentle embrace during one quiet evening on the terrace, the city lights twinkling below. The paternal love he felt burned with passionate intensity, a fierce attachment that reshaped his entire world. Yet the inner storm raged on remorse, guilt, and the violent need to confront the betrayal while keeping Lily and Tommy safe. The second major twist had shattered old certainties, but it also solidified his resolve. In the condensed emotional stillness that followed, with Lily's small hand in his and Tommy leaning close, Vincent whispered a promise only they could hear. "I will protect you. You are my family now, my daughter, my son. Nothing will take that away." The prison visit and the devastating revelation had changed everything. The inner worlds of all three were being torn apart and slowly remade through compassion, responsibility, and the healing power of chosen and blood bonds. The path ahead remained filled with suspense and drama, but the fatherly love that had ignited from the very first warning now burned brighter than any empire Vincent had ever built. Later that night, the penthouse was wrapped in uneasy silence, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Vincent Callahan stood at the edge of the terrace, the cool breeze carrying the scent of wet concrete and distant water. Inside, Lily and Tommy slept in their rooms, their breathing soft and trusting after another day of growing closeness. The luxury around Vincent, the warm glow of recessed lighting on marble, the deep sofas, the private security that shielded them from the world below, felt both sanctuary and cage. His empire of gleaming skyscrapers and powerful unions had always given him control. Now it threatened the fragile family he was desperately trying to build. The revelation from the prison visit still burned inside him like an open wound. Lily was his biological daughter. The consigliere he had trusted for years had known all along and had helped conceal the truth, even ensuring Maria's illness went untreated, so no claim could ever challenge Vincent's power. The betrayal cut deeper than any rival strike coming from within the very circle he had called family. Next morning, the legal hearings for permanent guardianship loomed closer. Vincent had poured every resource into the process, lawyers, home studies, character references, yet the inner storm raged harder than ever. His paternal love for Lily and Tommy burned with passionate protective intensity, but gnawing remorse threatened to consume him. These children had once endured absolute poverty, thin, malnourished bodies weakened by constant hunger, sleep-deprived eyes shadowed by endless cold nights, huddled in doorways where wind whipped mercilessly, humiliating days of scavenging scraps, while the world passed by without care. The disparity crushed him. While he lived in effortless wealth, Lily and Tommy had survived powerless against every absurdly unfair rejection and cruelty life had thrown at them. Later that afternoon, the ultimate betrayal strike came without warning. Vincent had taken Lily and Tommy for a quiet outing near Lake Michigan, a simple walk along the shoreline to give them fresh air and a sense of normalcy. The water sparkled under pale sunlight, seagulls calling overhead. For a brief moment, quiet, condensed, emotional stillness settled over them. Lily's small hand slipped into Vincent's, her voice soft and polite. "This feels like what families do," she said timidly, though a flicker of lingering anxiety still shadowed her blue eyes. Tommy walked on her other side, his loyalty now firm. "Yeah, it does." Then the attack erupted. A black SUV screeched to a halt nearby. The consigliere stepped out with two armed men, his face twisted with cold calculation. The confrontation was bold and unexpected, tension crackling in the open air near the water's edge. "You should have stayed focused on business, Vincent," the consigliere said, voice low and menacing. "Bringing street kids into our world was a mistake, especially one who carries your blood." Vincent positioned himself protectively in front of Lily and Tommy, his powerful frame shielding them. "This ends now," he said with commanding calm, though his heart pounded with violent inner conflict. The drama escalated rapidly. The consigliere revealed the full depth of his betrayal in chilling detail. "I knew about the girl from the beginning. Maria was getting too close to claiming support. I made sure her illness took her before she could complicate things. A man in your position cannot afford loose ends or surprise heirs." The words struck Vincent like a physical blow. Extreme psychological shock crashed over him, numbness spreading through his body as the world seemed to tilt. Lily, his own daughter, had nearly been erased before he even knew she existed. Remorse tore at him with ferocious violence. While he had built towers that touched the sky, his own child had endured freezing nights, shaking from cold days of hunger that left her dizzy and weak, and the humiliating struggle of survival with no one to protect her. The paternal love he felt surged hotter than ever, a fierce, burning attachment that demanded he shield her at all costs. Lily froze, her thin frame trembling. A wave of horror and deep disorientation washed over her. She swayed dizziness, making her lose balance, as old fears of abandonment and loss flooded back. He hurt my mom," she whispered in a small, timid voice filled with shock and pain. Numbness spread through her, the sudden revelation numbing her senses. Tommy stepped forward, bravely placing himself beside Vincent. "You're not taking them," he shouted, his loyalty shining through despite the fear in his eyes. Gunfire rang out, not chaotic but sharp and deliberate. One of the men fired a warning shot that grazed Lily's arm as she tried to pull Vincent to safety. She cried out a small sound of pain and confusion, blood staining her sleeve. Tommy dragged Vincent toward better cover behind a concrete barrier, using the street smarts he had learned from years on the south side. In the chaos, the children's quick thinking once again saved lives. Tommy spotting an escape route toward a nearby park path. Lily urging Vincent to move even as pain made her vision blur. Vincent felt his inner world rip apart with unbearable intensity. The remorse was violent and consuming. His own trusted advisor had orchestrated the near death of his daughter and continued to endanger her. The powerful man who commanded respect across Chicago now fought not for territory but for the two children who had become his heart. His paternal love for Lily, passionate, fierce, and profoundly deep, clashed with gnawing guilt over every moment she had suffered while he lived in luxury. The disparity felt crushing his world of private security and endless resources against her history of thin, malnourished survival, sleep-deprived nights in freezing wind, and absurdly unfair suffering no child should ever know. In the heat of the moment, Vincent made a choice that changed everything. Instead of responding with the old code of violence that had defined his rise, he disarmed the consigliere in a tense struggle and handed him over to arriving security and police who had been alerted by his team. "No more," he said, voice rough with emotion. "This ends here." The rivals were taken into custody without further bloodshed. The scene left everyone shaken. Lily sat on the grass, holding her grazed arm, tears streaming down her face from pain, shock, and the overwhelming realization of her father's identity. Tommy knelt beside her, his own hands trembling but his loyalty unwavering. Later that night, back in the penthouse, the emotional drama reached its peak in the quiet aftermath. Vincent sat vigil in the living room while a doctor tended to Lily's minor wound. She looked small and fragile against the plush cushions, her malnourished frame still bearing the marks of years of hardship. Confusion and deep disorientation clouded her eyes. "You're really my dad?" she asked in a soft, timid voice, the words carrying both fear and a burning need for truth. Vincent knelt before her, his powerful hands gentle as he took hers. The inner tearing was almost unbearable. Violent remorse for failing her clashed with the overwhelming paternal love that had ignited the moment she warned him at the rooftop restaurant. "Yes," he said, voice thick with emotion. "And I am so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me most. Every cold night, every hungry day, every unfair moment, I will spend the rest of my life making it right." Tommy watched quietly, then stepped forward and placed a hand on Vincent's shoulder. "We saved each other," he said simply. In the condensed emotional stillness that followed, with the three of them huddled together under the soft glow of lamplight, healing began to take deeper root. Lily leaned into Vincent's side, her small body finally relaxing as trust and attachment overwhelmed her earlier fears. The paternal bond, fierce, protective, and profoundly moving, solidified in that moment. Vincent felt the last walls around his heart crumble. The powerful man who had built an empire through strength and calculation now understood that true legacy lay in compassion and responsibility. The final shocking twist, the consigliere's long-hidden role in Maria's fate and the attempt to erase Lily's existence, had nearly destroyed them. Instead, it forged them stronger. Vincent's remorse transformed into unbreakable resolve. No more violence for power's sake. He would dismantle parts of his old world to create a safer one for the children who had saved him in every way that mattered. As weeks passed and the legal process moved toward final adoption hearings, the family grew closer in quiet, meaningful ways. Lily's polite smiles came more freely. Tommy's loyalty deepened into brotherly affection. Vincent's inner conflict remained. The powerful man still carried scars, but the burning paternal love now guided every decision. In one quiet evening on the terrace with the city lights sparkling below, Lily looked up at Vincent, her voice soft but sure. "I'm glad I warned you that night. Even if it hurt. It brought us here." Vincent pulled both children close, tears he no longer hid glistening in his eyes. The ultimate betrayal had been confronted. The final twist had been survived. What remained was a father and his children, bound not only by blood and choice, but by the healing power of compassion that had redeemed them all. The path to permanence was now clear, paved with tears, trust, and the fierce love of a man who had finally learned that protecting the vulnerable was the greatest strength of all. Later that night, the penthouse glowed with soft, warm lamplight, while Chicago's skyline twinkled far below like a sea of distant stars. Vincent Callahan sat vigil in the living room, the weight of the lakeside confrontation still pressing heavily on his chest. The luxury around him, the deep leather sofas, the panoramic windows framing Lake Michigan, the quiet hum of perfect climate control, felt both shelter and reminder. His empire of towering buildings and powerful unions had once defined him. Now it seemed secondary to the two children resting in their rooms, their small bodies, finally safe after years of unimaginable hardship. Lily's grazed arm had been carefully bandaged by a trusted doctor. She slept now, her thin, malnourished frame curled beneath soft blankets, no longer shivering from the cold wind that had once cut through her faded Cubs hoodie on frozen Southside streets. Tommy lay in the next room, his breathing steady, but his young face still carrying the faint lines of exhaustion from too many sleepless nights of survival. Vincent's heart tore with increasing violence. The paternal love he felt for Lily, his own biological daughter, burned with passionate, protective intensity that consumed every corner of his being. The revelation of her true parentage, combined with the consigliere's monstrous betrayal, had left him numb and disoriented. Remorse clawed at him relentlessly. While he had lived in effortless wealth, his own child had endured absolute poverty, thin limbs weakened by constant hunger, sleep-deprived eyes shadowed by endless cold nights huddled in doorways, humiliating days of scavenging scraps behind diners while the world looked away. The disparity was crushing. His power could command anything, yet it had failed to protect the one person who mattered most from the very beginning. Next morning, sunlight streamed gently across the terrace. As Mrs. Chen prepared a simple breakfast of pancakes and fresh fruit, Lily emerged from her room, her bandaged arm held carefully, her blue eyes still carrying traces of shock and confusion from the previous day's events. She moved with hesitant steps, a wave of dizziness making her sway slightly, as old fears of loss and abandonment resurfaced. Vincent was at her side instantly, his powerful frame gentle as he guided her to a chair. "Easy," he said softly. "You are safe now." Lily looked up at him, her voice soft, timid, and polite despite the pain and disorientation. "It still feels like a dream, that you are my dad. Part of me is scared it will disappear like everything else good always did." The words struck Vincent with extreme psychological shock. In the quiet, condensed stillness of the morning light, his inner world ripped apart violently. Gnawing remorse mixed with fierce paternal love in a battle that left him breathless. He pictured Lily as a small child, enduring sleep-deprived nights, shaking from cold wind days when hunger made her head spin and balance fail, and absurdly unfair rejections that stripped her of any sense of security. While he had built skyscrapers that touched the clouds, his own daughter had survived on nothing but resilience and the loyalty of her friend Tommy. The guilt was almost unbearable. Tommy joined them, his loyalty now unshakable. "We are stronger together," he said quietly, echoing the words from the chaotic lakeside moment. His own guarded walls had fully crumbled, replaced by a brotherly attachment that warmed Vincent's heart even as it deepened his remorse. Weeks later, the healing process continued in small, meaningful ways, yet the drama refused to fade completely. One tense afternoon, while Vincent was finalizing paperwork for the adoption rival remnants, made one last desperate attempt to unsettle him. A bold street confrontation unfolded near the tower's service entrance, as Vincent stepped out briefly to meet his legal team. Two remaining associates of the former consigliere blocked his path, their voices low and threatening. "You think walking away from the old life will protect you? Callahan, loose ends have a way of coming back." The air crackled with suspense. Vincent stood firm, his commanding presence and calm authority diffusing the moment without violence. "That part of my life is over. These children are my future." The rivals eventually withdrew, but the encounter left Vincent shaken, reinforcing how closely his past still hovered over the family he was trying to build. When he returned upstairs, he found Lily sitting on the couch, her thin frame wrapped in a soft blanket. The confrontation had triggered memories for her. She swayed slightly, numbness spreading as anxiety and horror from her street days. Flooded back nights of freezing wind, humiliating hunger that left her powerless and dizzy, the constant fear of being separated from Tommy forever. "What if they keep coming?" she whispered, in her soft, polite voice, tears welling in her eyes. "What if they take everything away again?" Vincent knelt before her, his powerful hands gentle as he took hers. The inner tearing reached a violent crescendo. Extreme psychological shock gripped him as he witnessed his daughter's pain. A pain he should have prevented from the very beginning. His paternal love surged with overwhelming, burning intensity. a fierce attachment that demanded he shield her from any further suffering. Yet the remorse was consuming. While he had enjoyed every comfort money could provide, Lily had endured the most pitiful and humiliating poverty imaginable. In the condensed emotional stillness that followed, with only the soft sound of rain against the windows, Vincent spoke from the depths of his heart. "I spent years building power to protect what was mine. I just never knew you were the most important part of that. I failed you before I even knew you existed. But I will never fail you again." Lily leaned into him, her small body finally relaxing as overwhelming trust and attachment replaced her earlier fears. Tommy sat close by his quiet presence, a steady anchor. "We believe you," he said simply. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Vincent stood alone in his office, the weight of his choices pressing down with renewed force. The consigliere's betrayal, the deliberate concealment of Lily's existence, and the role in Maria's suffering still echoed in his mind. Violent inner conflict tore at him. The powerful man who had once ruled through strength now questioned every decision that had led him here. His remorse was deep and moving, a gnawing pain that refused to ease. Yet alongside it burned the fierce paternal love that had transformed him. Lily and Tommy were not just rescued children. They were his daughter and the loyal brother she had chosen. They had healed him in ways no amount of wealth or power ever could. One quiet evening several weeks later, as golden light bathed the penthouse, the family gathered for a simple dinner. Lily's arm had healed, leaving only a faint scar as a reminder. She helped Mrs. Chen set the table, her movements more confident, her polite voice carrying genuine warmth. "This feels like home," she said softly, though a flicker of lingering disbelief still crossed her face. The mindset of someone who had once been desperately poor, now suddenly surrounded by love and protection. Tommy smiled, his loyalty shining through. "It is home." Vincent felt the inner turmoil shift. The violent tearing between remorse and love had not vanished, but it was slowly being reshaped by purpose. In the condensed emotional stillness of that dinner table, with laughter replacing fear and shared stories replacing silence, he understood the depth of his transformation. These children, once thin and malnourished from years of survival, once powerless against cold wind and unjust systems, had become the center of his world. In the hospital vigil days after the confrontation, and in the quiet nights that followed, Lily and Tommy had repeatedly offered him comfort in their innocent way. Lily's soft words of forgiveness, Tommy's steady presence, both had bandaged not only physical wounds but the deeper emotional scars Vincent had carried for years. The paternal bond had grown stronger through every moment of shared vulnerability. One late night, as the city lights sparkled below, Vincent sat with Lily on the terrace. She looked up at him, her blue eyes clear and trusting. "I used to dream about having a dad who would stay," she whispered. "Now I have one." Vincent pulled her close, tears he no longer hid glistening in his eyes. The overwhelming surge of fatherly love, passionate, intense, and profoundly moving, filled every corner of his being. "And I have a daughter who saved me long before I could save her." Tommy joined them quietly, completing the circle. In that moment of quiet, condensed emotional stillness, Vincent made his choice final and clear. He would fully embrace fatherhood. He would use his wealth and influence for good, dismantling harmful parts of his old world and building something better. The legal adoption process, already moving forward with strong support, would be completed with his whole heart. The powerful man who had once commanded Chicago from glass towers now understood that true strength lay in compassion, responsibility, and the unwavering protection of the vulnerable. Lily and Tommy had healed his deepest wounds physically through their courage, during the attack emotionally through their innocent kindness and trust. As weeks turned into a gentle rhythm of family life, Vincent felt the inner storm begin to calm. Remorse remained as a quiet teacher rather than a tormentor. The paternal love that had ignited the moment a small girl in a faded Cubs hoodie warned him at the rooftop restaurant now burned steadily, guiding every decision. In the quiet, condensed stillness of the penthouse, with Lily's small hand in his, and Tommy leaning close, Vincent whispered the words that sealed his transformation. "You are my family, my daughter, my son. I choose you today, tomorrow, and for the rest of my life." The healing had begun in earnest. The wounds of the past were slowly closing, replaced by the profound joy of chosen and blood-bound fatherhood. For Vincent Callahan, the journey from hollow power to genuine purpose had reached its most beautiful turning point. Later that night, the penthouse rested in gentle quiet, the soft glow of city lights painting Lake Michigan in silver hues. Vincent Callahan stood on the terrace, the cool breeze brushing his face as he gazed at the sprawling Chicago skyline he had helped shape with steel and vision. The luxury that once defined his world, soaring ceilings, private elevators, and effortless comfort, now felt secondary to the two children sleeping peacefully inside. His heart carried a depth of emotion that no amount of power had ever touched. Lily and Tommy had become his anchor. The thin, malnourished girl who once endured freezing nights huddled against cold wind, scavenging for scraps while sleep evaded her exhausted body, now rested in a warm bed with clean linens and the promise of tomorrow. Tommy, her loyal friend who had shared every humiliating struggle and powerless moment, now knew safety and belonging. The disparity between Vincent's vast wealth and their former pitiful existence still evoked deep remorse within him. While he commanded resources beyond measure, they had survived on nothing but courage and each other, facing absurdly unfair rejections that stripped away dignity and hope. Next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows as the final adoption hearing approached. Vincent's legal team had prepared thoroughly, yet the inner tearing in his heart grew increasingly intense. Remorse for the years Lily had suffered alone clashed violently with the overwhelming paternal love that burned passionately from the moment she warned him at the rooftop restaurant. This was his daughter, flesh and blood, he had unknowingly abandoned to poverty's cruel grip. The violent conflict inside him left him numb at times, dizzy with the weight of every cold night she had endured while he lived in luxury. Later that afternoon, a final tense street confrontation tested his resolve one last time. While driving near a construction site to finalize a charitable project, remnants of the old rival faction appeared unexpectedly, their bold words laced with fading threats. "You think walking away makes you untouchable?" Callahan Vincent met them with calm authority, his commanding presence diffusing the moment without escalation. "My family comes first now. That path ends here." The rivals withdrew, the suspense dissolving into quiet resolution. Vincent returned home with renewed clarity. His wealth would now serve compassion rather than conflict. Weeks later, the adoption hearing took place in a sunlit Chicago courtroom. Lily sat beside Vincent in a simple navy dress, her small hand resting trustingly in his. Tommy sat on her other side, his posture steady with hard-earned loyalty. The judge reviewed the documents with a warm smile, noting the extraordinary bond that had formed through courage and kindness. When the ruling came, permanent adoption granted for both children, quiet tears of joy filled the room. In the condensed emotional stillness that followed the hearing, Lily looked up at Vincent, her voice soft, timid, and polite. "Does this mean we are really yours forever?" A wave of lingering disbelief and deep disorientation crossed her face, as if the sudden safety still felt like a fragile dream after years of powerless survival. Vincent knelt to her level, his powerful frame humbled. "Yes, my daughter. You and Tommy are my family. Nothing will change that." The paternal love surged through him with burning intensity, washing away layers of gnawing remorse. He had once been a man defined by power. Now he was defined by protection and love. Love that transcended any barrier of wealth or poverty. Love that saw no difference in skin color or background. Only the shared humanity that bound them. 10 years later, the transformation was complete and deeply moving. The penthouse had evolved into a true family home filled with laughter books and the warmth of shared meals. Lily had grown into a compassionate young woman studying social work, driven by the memory of her own struggles and the lesson that knowledge opens doors once locked by circumstance. Tommy now, a confident young man, pursued education and community development, carrying the lesson that every child deserves a chance to learn and grow beyond their beginnings. Vincent had stepped back from the more shadowy aspects of his old world, channeling his resources into the Callahan Foundation programs, offering education, safe housing, and mentorship to at-risk youth across Chicago. One quiet evening on the terrace, as the sun set over the lake in watercolor hues, Vincent sat with his children. Lily's voice remained gentle, though now carried the strength of experience. "I used to think wealth and poverty could never meet, but you showed us they can through compassion." Tommy nodded, adding, "The real lesson is that knowledge changes lives and education builds bridges where none existed." Vincent felt the inner conflict that once tore at him now softened into wisdom. The remorse had taught its final lesson that true power lies in lifting others. He had learned that knowledge of one's own failures can become the foundation for healing, and that education, both formal and of the heart, creates lasting change. The lesson of compassion transcended every divide, proving that wealth and poverty cannot separate love when humanity is placed first. In the condensed emotional stillness of that golden hour, Vincent reflected on the journey. The small girl in the faded Cubs hoodie, who once warned a stranger, had not only saved his life but had taught him the greatest lesson of all, that knowledge of pain can inspire kindness, and that education and empathy creates families where none existed before. He had learned that every child carries potential, and that the lesson of unconditional love heals even the deepest wounds. As the city lights began to sparkle below, Vincent turned to the camera with a gentle smile, speaking directly from the heart. "Dear friends, watching this story, we hope it touched something deep within you. Remember that knowledge opens hearts, and the lesson of compassion can transform even the hardest circumstances. Education and kindness creates ripples that reach far beyond what we imagine." May this tale remind you that love knows no boundaries of wealth or poverty, and that every act of understanding brings us closer together. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with others, so we can bring many more engaging videos every day. We would love to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? How does it connect to your own life experiences? Please share your thoughts in the comments below so we can listen to the emotions from deep within your hearts. Goodbye for now, and we promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.